Good afternoon. My name is William Howard. Today we'll be discussing the novel Go Set a Watchman by Harper Lee. Before we get to the novel, I'm going to get a little bit of background information about myself. As of right now, I'm currently employed at Alvin ISD. I'm a teacher and coach at the middle school, Wardell Palms Junior High. I specialize in special education. I'm part of the behavior program there. Now back to the novel. The author Harper Lee was born in 1926 in Monroeville, Alabama. Okay, she's very known for a very popular novel. Many people know it's first to me, but I think many people know about this, To Kill a Mockingbird. Unfortunately, Mrs. Lee passed away earlier this year. Before she passed away, she was able to see her other novel, Go Set a Watchman, be published. Now on to the novel. Throughout the novel, you see a lot of historical points and facts in the novel that has a great deal a lot with going on with the education setting and curriculum in our school system from the 1950s on up to 2016. For example, with the Brown versus Board of Education during the 1954, it plays an impact role with the setting and what's going on with the high rise and the climax going on in the novel, especially what's going on with today's days. Also, in the novel, you get introduced to the NAACP and the civil rights. Usually, the early 1950s, this is when you start seeing more civil rights movements and more of the marches and protests and concerns and stuff. Also, I like to deal with the way of Alabama, how it was in the South. Whereas the main character, Jean Louise Finch, she's coming from school in New York, which is in the North. Life in New York was very different from life as it was in the South, as we can tell. Because in Alabama, they lived by the Jim Crow law. In the 1950s, the world was changing, so was the meaning of the law. The character, Jean Louise Finch, reflects the thinking of many Americans during that time, during the civil rights movement. Many of them thought that equality was the main goal of all people there. They thought the Constitution was designed for that, for voting rights and equal opportunity to any school for all race and all religions. They also thought about that it was able for all people, all race and colors should have same equal rights as the others. The set is a fictional place. The county or the town is called Macomb, Alabama. During this time in Alabama, you have a big push for integration and voting rights. And the novel centers around the main character, Jenny Louise Finch, and her father, which she refers to as Atticus. Her father, Atticus, and her are at ends over civil rights issues because he feels as though the Jim Crow law is constitutional right, and it feels though that is the correct way it should be. For she thinks that the Supreme Court decision, Brown versus Board of Education, separate but not equal, is also correct, and that it should be integration in the school system along also in the working system. In the Jim Crow Alabama, you had a lot of African Americans that were denied the rights to vote. They were not allowed to be on juries, so if you were convicted of, accused of a crime, your jury would be all white, your judge was all white, especially during the South, your executioner was all white. Many jobs that the blacks held during this time were labor. As you say, the North was more of an industry, and the South was agricultural industry. One thing that complicates the character Atticus, who supports the Jim Crow society and thinks the Constitution does too, is how it explains his demeanor in the book. Because during the novel, the main character, Jean Louise Finch, she has a revelation. She sees her father in one eye as she grows up, but when she gets older, comes home, she sees him in another view. What I mean by that is by example it says in the novel is that Atticus took a case where a black boy was charged of rape of a white girl. In the eyes of his daughter, Jean Louise Finch, she thought as though he seen as all humans were equal. He didn't see humans as black and white or one person was superior than the other. But there's another situation in the book where she comes to and she finds out that he's on a certain political city council that we refer to something similar to the KKK. So she's at odds, and she has thoughts and mixed emotions about what to think about her father, and she starts to find out more about her town and the people that live in there. For example, it says that Jean Louis' uncle tells us that Atticus will always do it by the letter and by the spirit of the law. In this reference, Atticus' version of the law was informed by the separate but equal doctrines, which has been the rule for him up until the Brown versus Board of Education. And when that decision came down by the Supreme Court, that made a major shift towards the environment and climate in the South. Next, I would like to go over 3 points that I would like to share that I have correlated and shown a connection between the textbook and also the novel. The textbook, the principle, and the novel. The first point I'd like to come across is the 10th Amendment. Now, we had one of our lessons on our chapter discussions that dealt with one of the amendments. One of them was the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment pretty much states that the federal government possesses the power to delegate over the state or the people as the Constitution states in certain situations. Why this is very important is because in a novel, it talks about a particular situation. For example, it says in the book, even Jean Louise is skeptical of Brown versus Board of Education. She tells her father she thinks it's inconsistent with the 10th Amendment, which deals with states' rights. This is an argument that was popular with states' rights advocates and segregationists in the 1950s. This is during the Jim Crow law era. Many whites were in politicians and they were against integration, so they felt as though the Brown versus Board of Education did not agree or go against the 10th Amendment. Referring to the textbook, as you see in later chapters, it deals with the prayer and religion issues going on in school. For example, in the textbook, it refers to a case similar to the one in Texas City, pretty much close to where I grew up with, Santa Fe. The case deals with the issue of prayer going on during an athletic activity, they had to go from the state government courts all the way to the Supreme Court to finally get a decision on that case. So that's how that ties into the novel and the textbook. My second sharing point, we have to deal with the racial and ethical discrimination that is throughout the novel, and also that throughout the textbook that has to deal with principles in the school setting. Starting off with the novel, they have one character named Miss O'Hannon, who's a part of the Special Citizen Council group that they say that he refers to. He goes on a racist tyrant, referring to all African Americans as having child's mindset, even adults, and are not civilized. He feels as though we're trying to mongrelize the race, that we're small brains, we hang from trees, so on and so on, and he's pretty much degrading our whole race. You have examples like that. For example, in one chapter it talks about a pamphlet that her father Atticus had, talks about the Black Plague. The other issue I deal with is decision making. More important, decision making deals with that society, they had the Maycomb Citizen Council. Okay, that's very similar to what a principal does as far as with committee dealing with issues. In the book, the city council did with the issue of integration and voting rights for blacks. In the textbook, you have a situation where the principal has come up with committees with stakeholders from the neighborhood to deal with gang violence or budgeting. To wrap up and close up with this, I feel as though the novel touched a lot of key points that reflect on my thinking as far as my future career aspirations and goals. Eventually, I do want to go to administration, mainly sports, and I believe it though, as told in the novel and as in told in our education curriculum, one of the main things we need to do is try to close in the achieving gap between minority students and white students. Another thing we need to tackle that I feel is very important to my future is the advantages and disadvantages that minorities and other people have versus the ones of whites and social higher economic classes. And another issue I deal with that's going to affect my career aspirations is the hiring of staff appropriately for the students. It should be a reflection of the students. If the school population is 80% minority, then the staff should be 80% minority. And that's how it should be. Again, my name is William Howard, and I thank you for everything. You've been here. Enjoy your evening.